Ladies and gentlemen, this is the state of the scene.
Yo, what the fuck is up, Warped Tour? The state of the scene at SOTS Podcast on all social media. Sam here with Margos.
Sam, I have a secret I never told you.
I feel like we've done this intro before. Is it on the tip of your tongues and the back of your lungs?
No, not even.
Okay.
No. I'm a writer.
What do you mean you're a writer?
I'm a writer. I've never told you that I'm a writer. Do you know what I write?
Oh, God. I don't... Can I skip this? Can I say, no, I don't give a shit? And just move on?
This is
that an option?
Unskippable cutscene.
What do you write, Margos?
Sam, I write sins, not tragedies.
Oh, God damn it. I don't like that you set me up with like one lyric only to pivot into another one.
No, that was your own brain working against you.
It wasn't my own brain working against me. I just assumed that everything... You remember when you used to open the show with like a lyric? That's me just sort of assuming you were back on that old like grind. Yeah. Back to your old habits.
No. Never again, I think. Never again.
So obviously we got a huge announcement this week. Well, so we sort of got two huge announcements this week, and we'll jump into them in just a second.
We kind of have three.
We've got maybe five.
At least two. We promised two.
At least two. Bare minimum two. We get a jam-packed episode for you. Obviously, we're going to talk about this When We Were Young festival lineup. Obviously, we're going to talk about Panic at the Disco coming back. Obviously, we're going to talk about Ghost banning phones at all of their concerts. Obviously, we're going to talk about the new fucking Cade Hill album. But like, surprise, we're also going to be talking about the new Make Them Suffer album, which will drop the week you're listening to this. But we've got early thoughts. We've heard it. We are going to review it. Plus, there's some new music this week and a bunch of other stupid news. As always, if you want to support us, patreon.com/SOTS Podcast. I'm going to shout it out early at the top of the show, Margos, because we are getting our asses beat over on patreon.com, and we need your support.
Why do you say it like that?
We need your fucking support.
No, don't say it like that.
Imagine
really great things are happening over at Patreon.
Behind us, there is an hourglass.
Rainbows.
And there is sand falling slowly from it. And once that sand gets to the bottom, the show fucking disappears from the face of the internet. And the only way to reset that fucking little hourglass is to subscribe for $3 a month on patreon.com/SOTS Podcast.
Or more.
Think about that. No, things are getting grave. You want me to talk about things being good? They're bad, actually. They're really fucking bad. I can't even afford coffee anymore. Inflation is killing us. It's killing us.
Just us, though, not you at home listening.
Specifically. Everybody else seems to be doing fine, but we're getting fucking killed over here.
Y'all are doing great. You don't need your money, clearly. Give it to us. Because, Sam, it's how we can improve the show and dedicate more time to it. So, and over there, that's where a lot of the overflow from this regular show goes into, right? Like, we hit a show. We're not always going to be able to talk about it on the show. We're going to talk about it on Patreon.
Y'all making me beg for money at the top of the show? You should feel fucking ashamed of yourself.
I'm trying to redeem this in any possible
ashamed of yourself.
way.
It's not your fault. It's their fucking fault.
Right. Everyone's too busy selling out these fests. Mm-hmm. They should be selling out our Patreon.
Mm-hmm. Let's get into it.
The news.
When We Were Young Fest have announced the 2025 lineup featuring the return of Panic at the Disco playing A Fever You Can't Sweat Out in full, headlining alongside Blink-182 playing an era set of hits, and additional performances from Weezer, Avril Lavigne, The Offspring, The Used, Knock Loose, Yellowcard, Simple Plan, Motionless in White, Ice Nine Kills, and lots more. The festival is already sold out and are asking... Well, there's no day two yet. They're asking fans to join the wait list if they'd like to see a second date added. So, like... The decision's in your hands. Do you want to see the state of the scene continue? Or do you want a second day of When We Were Young Fest? You can't have both. It's one or the other.
If I were a betting man, a gambler, as this takes place in Vegas, right? Odds of a day two of When We Were Young Fest not happening in 2025 are embarrassingly low. Like if you bet on it not happening, you should not be trusted with money.
It would be one of two things that would cause that, right? It would either be a reflection of how people feel about the lineup, which we'll get into the broader amount of bands that are on here, or or competition is fierce. So even though When We're Young Fest is already sold out, maybe people are sitting back and they're going, but what about Warped Tour?
It's sandwiched in between a couple of dates.
Now I've got a lot of options. Now I got a lot of options, and I'm going to, maybe some of them are closer. Now people in Orlando, they're like, well, fuck that. I'm not going to get a flight to Vegas. I have my very own When We Were Young Fest revival happening in my city. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we could go see the Young Veins come back and perform at Warped Tour, their album,
their singular album in full,
the Bing Bongs in full, whatever the fuck that album was called.
How much time do you think it would take for both of us to remember what the name of the Young Veins album was? It self-titled?
It would be 2025.
Was it self-titled?
No, it was definitely like fucking the time capsule to the fucking some shit like that.
Yeah. A Bright New Day. What the fuck was it called?
A bright
Dreams. What was it called?
No.
That would be the funniest possible thing Warped Tour could do. The Young Veins playing whatever their fucking album was in full.
Is that even a reunion, or is that just like a band that has quietly just stuck around?
Did the Young Veins even fucking tour? Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know if they made it that far. Like, obviously they got an album out, but it's not like I caught them.
The Young Veins, for anyone lost at home, that's Ryan Ross's band.
That's
who he
Ross's band. That was
Panic
Ryan
at
Ross
the Disco.
Was that Ryan Ross and John Walker? Because it was two members.
Was probably there.
It was half. It was like half of Panic. They split right down the middle. Yeah. All right, Marcus. Let's before we get into more Panic at the Disco talk, let's talk about the broader lineup here. And I want to get
back.
I want to get a vibe check.
Avril's back.
So obviously we're not doing full albums by bands again this year, right? Like we've squashed that. That was a once in a lifetime thing, with the singular exception of Panic at the Disco.
Ice Nine and Motionless are literally back in the exact same spots they were on the original When We Were Young Fest poster.
It is deeply funny to me that like everybody knows that like if you're interested in one of these two bands, you're interested in both of them.
Right.
So you're like, just put them right next to each other on every single poster we ever do this.
I saw those two and immediately like it was on Looking for Black Veil Brides.
Oh my God, that's such a good point. Guarantee you on my fucking life,
who aren't on this,
on my fucking
what's happening on your life.
If we go back and we look at that Sonic Temple Festival, it's same thing. It's got to be Motionless and right. Ice Nine right next to each other. Same bullshit. All right, so we've got some returning bands, right? Like, good news, everybody. Boys Like Girls are back again this year, right?
I'm
Taking Back
sure
Sundays back again. The Used is back again.
Sleeping with Sirens, I think, have played this like 4 years in a row.
This is like a residency at this point, right? There's some interesting ones on here though.
Tsunami.
Let Live. Okay, Tsunami.
Let Live.
Yeah. So they did, well, not maybe they, but like Jason was talking about earlier this year, doing like Blackest Beautiful, like goodbye shows or something like that, like a celebration of the band. And I guess this is like theoretically one of, or potentially the only show. Like, it's hard to say, right? Fever 333 just put out a new album, but they canceled their tour. For mental health reasons. I wonder if we see them rebook a tour, if we see Let Live gain some traction next year. Like, this is all very curious. I think it's deeply interesting to me how low on this poster some of the bands are in terms of what I consider to be their popularity. Like, Asking Alexandria feels like they're sort of tossed in here as an afterthought, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you think if you got Asking Alexandria for this and you paid them the right amount of money, you would be like, hey, self-titled in full? Like, I know this band hates that album with a passion, but like, I can't imagine Panic at the Disco is a huge fan of playing their first album anymore either, and they're still doing it.
So, I mean, that is the biggest difference this year and last year, outside of like the lineup, of course.
There's no hook anymore. There's no gimmick.
No, well, your gimmick is that it's only your headliners playing albums in full.
Well, yeah, headliner, because Blink-182 is playing a collection of hits from multiple albums. They're not playing any of them in full.
I thought they were.
No. They're playing songs off of Enema of the State.
Enema of the State in full.
No, sir. Performing songs from Enema of the State, Take Off Your Pants and Jerk It, Self-Titled, and more.
Yeah, then you could just say it's a Blink-182 set. Why are we
That's precisely clear, which is why it's deeply funny that
the fucking Fall Out Boy of 2025.
I think you have to specify only because Panic at the Disco is playing a full album, so that, like, you know, last year we got, like, a lot of questions around Fall Out Boy because they just didn't say. And we all know that ostensibly they're just going to be playing hits, but, like, I think they're getting ahead of it by clarifying.
Blink-182 yet again playing a nostalgia festival. Of course, we'll be playing songs off of 3 very old albums.
I mean,
why is that even a talking point? Or an asterisk here on the poster?
Yeah, I think it's only an asterisk because you set people up with the idea that potentially they're doing the same thing as Panic at the Disco, right? So you almost just do it to get ahead of it. Like, you don't want the questions, so you're just like, okay, well, let's clarify for this specifically because obviously our other headliner is playing an album in full. Interesting fact, Blink-182 is the only repeat headliner alongside My Chem. So it went, year 1 was My Chem and Paramore. Year 2 was Green Day and Blink. Year 3 was My Chem and Fall Out Boy. And now we're back to Blink and Panic at the Disco. So it's Blink and My Chem are like trading years off at this point.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they do have like these 2 bands that have like traded off and it's like, okay, well, like My Chem is our emo year, Blink's our pop punk year. Like we hook them each time.
Yep. Really interesting though, because I at this point would guess like you don't bring My Chem back next year.
It's hard to say, right? Because for all we know, and obviously this is like,
there's a lot of discourse
fantasy
around that.
Like, what if My Chemical Romance goes and drops like more new music this year, and then suddenly they're on like a world tour the following year, and like, it makes sense for them to play this. Like, it's really hard to say. You know what I mean? I feel like it's kind of a big missed opportunity not to have a lot of these bands performing albums in full. I mean, think to yourself like what it would mean to have Weezer perform the Blue album. You know what I mean?
I mean, they still might.
No,
part of
you
me
would
thinks when we were young doesn't even want to bother committing to it
because so many bands kind of did their own bullshit this year.
Well, I mean, from like
but that's the sell though. That's the sell. The sell is putting it on the poster. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't seem like it matters, right? Because it's sold out immediately, anyways.
Yeah.
Which maybe that was telling for them. Maybe they're like, hey, we don't have to go and do all of this. Like, maybe we know that these tickets are going to sell regardless, so we're just going to avoid it and let the bands play whatever they want.
We're jumping a little all over the place. Sure, I just want to add some final thoughts on a couple of things you mentioned. Yeah, as far as tour posters go and like logo placement, and sizes of fonts and whatnot, it is crazy to me that you have someone like Sleeping with Sirens and Ask Alexandria be like the same size as like the Cab and Kubla Khan, who are, you know, like, this is not a reflection of how good those bands are. It's like popularity wise, like, I mean, Ask Alexandria's got a, like, they should be bigger than the Used on this list. And I know that it's like a whole nostalgia fest. Also, I can't believe the Used have done this like 5 years in a row too. Have they missed a year?
The Used like that fucking check. And I don't blame them.
They like that
I don't
check.
fucking blame them. If you told me Taking Back Sunday, I bet on this every year too, I'd believe you.
Right. So like, just wanted to say that, like, you're right. Like, this poster is a little crazy because I think once you get under like the all-time low Used Knocked Loose line, the rest of it's just, well, here's bands that are playing, let's throw them all over.
To be fair, this is a problem for a lot of festivals, in terms of that there are so many bands that they have to put on their poster. I think this is actually a slightly smaller problem for When We Were Young Fest, because overall, I think that they have slightly less bands than some of these other bigger festivals where it just looks like a fucking Excel sheet of like 85 bands.
Right.
And the only one that you can make out like from a distance is Metallica.
Well, at least like we're still able to use mostly just their logos.
Right. Right. Like you can, but it is curious that like when you get such a glut of bands, the ones that like by default end up being smaller on this, almost lost in this list a little bit, which is interesting because this is one thing that Warped Tour said they wanted to avoid, right? That they want to announce their bands on a weekly basis because they don't want someone like Tsunami or fucking
Jack's Mannequin,
Jack's Mannequin, or Breathe Carolina, which almost you blink and miss that they're going to be playing this festival, right? To go unnoticed. But again, part of me feels like it doesn't even matter. It's almost like at this point, it's the strength of the event and the culture, right? Which is to say that if you're into this style of music, we could have probably dropped the first 8 bands on here and this would have sold out regardless, right? Yeah. You would have said, hey, it's Panic and Blink headlining. By the way, fucking Weezer and The Used and Knocked Loose are going to be there. And people would have been like, yeah, that's all I need. I'll find out what the other 50 bands are when I get there. There's also only so many fucking bands. You know what I mean? Like, obviously we're starting to get repeats. And like, if it's not the year before, it's the year before that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, starting to get repeats is an interesting way to phrase it.
Well, it's just repetitive across the board, right? Like people go, oh my God, all these festivals are the same. And you're right. Like sooner or later, there are only so many bands that can fill out these festivals unless, you know, somebody gets bold enough to say, hey, I'm going to cut it off at like 20 familiar names. And then again, this is where Warped Tour could sort of show the type of festival that they used to be by bringing in a lot of smaller bands, right? It'll be curious to see if they choose to do that. And you just let your headliners carry your ticket sales.
If I don't mention this, I'm going to explode. We fucking called it, Sam.
I know we called it. And we'll get in.
Holy shit, bro.
But we called it for Warped, right? We were like, oh, how can Warped answer? How can Warped answer this shit? Obviously easy, bro. They get Panic at the Disco back. They're playing a Fever You Can't Sweat Out.
No, we called it for this.
We called it for this?
We called it for this. This entire time, Panic at the Disco, a Las Vegas band, would eventually return to headline a festival. Like, this was destiny.
Before we get into the Panic at the Disco,
we're so fucking smart because we called it would be a Fever You Can't Sweat Out in full.
Do you have any more general thoughts about this before we move on to like a broader Panic discussion about returning to the festival?
If I had to rank When We Were Young Fest lineups,
Never Shout Never's on here, by the way, and they essentially said that they're done making music like 4 days before this announcement. So who the fuck knows what's going on with that?
They've said that 5 times.
Yeah. Christopher Drew's like, I'm never playing another song again in my life. And then 3 days later, this, like, I don't know if he's fucking with people or what's going on.
I mean, overall, so it's a good lineup. I'm not going to lie. Like, obviously, a dozen bands on here, I'm dying to say, at least, right? And that said, I think this is one of the weaker When We Were Young Fest lineups. I know that's been, like, some discourse that we've been seeing is a lot of people aren't impressed with it. But if I had to, like, just as far as ranking these festivals year after year, I certainly don't take this over last year's festival.
Last year had novelty. This does not have novelty.
First one, it had the novelty of being the first one, but you also had Paramore there. You had My Chem again.
Do you think it's always going to be like this? Is you're going to kind of have like these off years based on your personal taste? Like obviously when we get like these lineups that are a little more like pop punk focused and you're seeing bands like The Offspring or artists like Yellow Card, Simple Plan, Avril Lavigne, like you just kind of look at all those names and you're like, okay, well that's the side of the scene that I'm a little less passionate about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm not losing my mind to go see like the Gaslight Anthem. Mayday Parade's been on every fucking one of these too. I swear. I fucking know it. One more thing that I'm kind of curious about is if you can glean any potential tours off of this. You know, you see a band like Don Broco on here and you're like, okay, what are you doing? Who are you coming over with? Who's this tied into?
Right. Yeah.
Like, are you going to go on a tour again with Sleeping with Sirens when they drop their new album and it's going to lead into this?
So I don't know if you already had it in the news, Sam, but there's the issue here is that it happened so much earlier, but like Plot and You were touring with Holding Absence.
I know, but Plot and You isn't on here, right? Which is kind of curious. Oh, they are. Oh my God, you're right. They're right up top. They get lost in this fucking...
A little bit, yeah.
They get a little lost.
But granted, that's like 6 months removed from this festival eventually happening. So like I don't think you really can yet.
There is one other thing, by the way.
Sure, what?
Last year... This fucking festival got a lot of shit for not booking any women. And then they called it audible like 30 minutes after and like added 6 more bands to the poster.
Yep.
They got the same heat this year and they said, what are you going to do? They're like, all right. It's like, okay, sold out one day.
So I'm not gonna lie.
It's like pressure was on last year and they acted. Pressure was on this year and they're like, yeah, I don't got it in me. I'm sorry. I already shut the lights off in the office. I'm not going back in there to figure this shit out. It's so fucking crazy that it's like, bro, the second you take your foot off of their neck, but even when you keep it there, there's only so much they're willing to give. They're like, we booked it already. Like,
listen,
this poster's full.
Everyone knows there's only 8 bands with, non-male members. So they got their 6 or 7 last year. They got Avril Lavigne this time around.
We got repeats.
What are they going to do?
We got repeats on here. We got repeats on. You could have repeated. You could have repeated
100%. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. After like the initial excitement of seeing like the headliners, that is the first thing I looked for on the rest of this poster, because there was a part of me that's just like, did they learn from that mistake of not booking it? Like, this poster is almost like this lineup is, it probably does have more women initially than last year's did.
I know, but that's like the bar was on. I know the bar was in the basement. You know what I mean?
Right, but like that's like the first thing I looked at, and I'm like, okay, well, there is some. That's for certain. Are there many? Absolutely not, and it's so fucking unforgivable.
Part of me feels like, okay, well, what are ways that Warped Tour can kind of look at this and answer? You know what I mean? And ultimately, I wonder if it even matters, because part of me feels like it's so many of the same people profiting off of these that it's just like everybody's just handshaking their way to the end here. And like everybody's just going to make money. So it's like, I bet you it's not that Warped Tour is going to have like a bunch of different bands. It will. But the truth is I think they're also going to have a bunch of these fucking bands as well. Like, Yellow Card's going to be there. The Used will be there. Fucking Taking Back Sunday is going to show up all over again.
The issue with Warped is they'll find a way to make it the weirdest thing possible. They'll be like, and this year's Warped, we've got the women's stage.
Oh my God.
And right. And it'll just be like really strange.
Stop. The women's stage would be right. Actually the funniest thing.
And it's the only spot they're playing.
Like they're trying to be progressive and they just like fumble it so badly. All right. Panic at the Disco played their last show on March 10th, 2023.
Less than a year ago. Or not less than a year ago.
More than a year ago.
But it was last year that it took place.
And
last calendar year.
It will be 2.5 years, assuming they do nothing between now and when we were Young Festival, that they will have returned. The lineup for the festival remains unconfirmed, with many wondering if the original lineup of A Fever You Can't Sweat Out era of Panic at the Disco, which included Ryan Ross, Spencer Smith, and either Brent Wilson, who like recorded it, or John Walker, who toured it.
John Walker.
Though will be there, though we have some hints on what to expect. So, Marcos, Mike Narin, the band's most recent guitarist, has seemingly confirmed their involvement via Instagram. This may not entirely squash the idea of a reunion of the original lineup, but it certainly implies it is more likely that we see the most recent makeup of the project than what fans would have hoped for.
So, a couple of thoughts. I think if we are to see any member return, if only like briefly for a song or two, it's Spencer Smith, who had the longest tenure alongside Brendan Urie on Panic at the Disco. The issue with like the dream of Ryan Ross and Brent Wilson rejoining the band is like,
or John Walker, as we mentioned earlier.
Right. Sure.
Brent Wilson, I want to say, like commented somewhere on Instagram. He's like, if the boys want me, I'll be there. Right. It's like, oh God, this is so sad.
Got nothing going on in October.
It's like, God damn it, man.
I think it is unrealistic. That said, like at some point I need to have hope, and I need to be.
Oh, would you say? Would you say
be a fucking dreamer?
Would you say you need to have
architect
would you
style?
Say? Would you argue you need to have high hopes?
I need to have high hopes, and I need Ryan Ross to be there. So whatever, Bad Blood is there. However much we hate Brendan Urie for one night and maybe two nights actually, put it aside.
We will crowdfund the couples therapy to get these two on a stage together again. Like, I don't care. Whatever it takes.
That's the draw. That's the appeal. If you play a Fever You Can't Sweat Out, I don't want to watch fucking Mike Nairn play it. I want to watch fucking Ryan Ross up on that stage. I want to see this band all fucking glammed out.
I want to be brutally honest and then also apologetic in advance of this statement. When I say
fuck Brandon Urie,
finding out Mike Nairn was going to be on this was like the least, like you couldn't have found a pulse in me when I heard that statement. like I did a hard, who? It was like, people, oh, Mike is going to be there. I'm like, what? You mean the seventh guitarist who's been a part of like, it would have been more exciting if they were like, Dallin Weeks is going to be here. Like, hey,
right. It's like,
up.
Okay,
what?
That's something. Yeah. So like measuring hype levels way up here. If it's, Ryan Ross led revival of original Panic,
what's the coolest way?
Way down here if it's just Brendan Urie and his fuck ass mustache back on that stage,
right?
With a bunch of fucking no names that no one cares about,
right? Like respectfully, but
yeah,
come on.
Well, also disrespectfully,
but like slightly disrespectfully. Sure.
Like you're up there playing one of my favorite albums of all time. I don't know your name. Get off that fucking stage.
Yeah, we don't need anyone here who knows how to play the riff at High Hopes. Like we're all set. We don't need the drummer here to play the breakdown in High Hopes. Okay, we're like all
I would
set.
love okay, bro. What's his fucking name? Something Nairn, Mike Nairn.
Sure.
Is performing. It's when Ryan Ross immediately exits the stage once that album's over, so that Panic can close on fucking High Hopes. Mm-hmm. Just immediately tagging in the B team.
I love the idea that they would like Ryan Ross is all right. Ryan, we're gonna have you come join in. We're gonna play for you guys. I'm gonna need you to learn a couple songs off of Viva Las Vengeance.
That is the most disrespectful thing you could ever tell that man.
But it's like the penance is like assuming that Brendan Urie fully runs the show at this point, he gets to be the shot caller, which right. I believe is 100% the case. He's gonna be like, yeah, but I don't know if you ever listened to Miss Jackson, but I'm gonna need you to learn this real quick.
Yeah, like that's I don't mind that split, Ryan. But can you do this for me? High Hopes, Miss Jackson, Boys, Girls, or whatever like that song.
Girls love boys who love girls or whatever. Yeah. Also, this is gospel. Yeah. Fucking. Yeah. All right.
Victorious.
What if they did some like crazy fuck shit where it's like Ryan Ross gets like fucking brought up from underneath the stage like like they really treat Ryan Ross like the second coming of Christ or something, you know what I mean?
Dude, that is half the sell of this entire bill for me though. To be there for a moment like that specifically, even like the fraction of a possibility that exists, is the appeal of buying a ticket, which I haven't done, but like maybe day two or day one if I feel like spending extra money on reseller tickets.
I didn't even think about the fact that, yeah, probably people do buy a bunch of those tickets and then resell them.
Yeah, for sure.
And they gamble on the fact that there'll be some huge announcement like, Ryan Ross is going to be there and they can knock that ticket up a couple $100.
Maybe.
Sure. So do you think we'll get anything? Final thought on this. Do you think we'll get anything from Panic at the Disco leading up to this festival? Like any sort of announcement, new music, return?
Nothing I want. Shut the fuck up and be ready when you have to be.
Brendan Urie left to raise
a father.
Right. Yeah. Like raise a child. And
grow a mustache.
But he might, maybe he's itching. You know what I mean? Maybe he's been in that studio. Like, who knows? Maybe there's stuff going on with Panic. It's hard to say, right? Like, obviously that band went out on the worst album in the history of humanity. There's a theoretical redemption arc somewhere in there.
Cannot believe that is actually an understatement.
Mm. Yeah. That's precisely correct.
One of the most forgettable albums ever made.
No, I remember it. It haunts me. Haley Williams will be presenting this year's Grammy nominees. So, Marcos, with any luck, we will hear the vocalist of Paramore acknowledge Bad Omens, Poppy, Wage War, or one of the many bands from the scene who's submitted for consideration.
No shot. No shot they give her that category, the good one.
Haley Williams is sitting there. She's like, and nominated for Metal Performance of the Year is Van featuring Poppy by Bad Omens. You don't think that could happen? You don't think this is a theoretical possibility?
Bro, I know
Paramore won what? Rock album of the year?
Noah's clipping that so quickly and throwing it on the set right before that song.
Just a really distorted.
If they win,
if they won, that would be insane.
And Haley announces it.
That would be insane.
Game over.
That would be insane. It was a lot of dreams coming true right there for a lot of different people. Marcos, former member Josh Balls joined Motionless in White during the performance at Apocalypse Fest on Halloween.
Something they do annually. That is Motionless in White's festival in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where they were born.
Correct.
Yeah.
He left the band back in 2017 after 11 years with the project. Market. Now, funny enough, it's my understanding that what this band did do was bring Josh Balls up from the bottom of the stage.
I didn't want to mention it earlier.
They gave him the Ryan Ross treatment. They gave him the Ryan Ross treatment.
They gave him the eventual Ryan Ross treatment.
They gave him the respect he deserves,
They
honestly.
also, funnier, they didn't just bring him up, they brought him down at the same time.
Shut up. How's that even possible?
And like Chris gives like a big emotional speech. It's just like, man, this is the hardest working guy in the history of this band and all that shit. It's like, everybody, he'll see you tomorrow. And then like he's given like the heart thing and like it very slowly just starts going down. So there's this awkwardness of just having to like wave a couple extra times more than you should have to.
It's probably like a president about to get on the plane or something. Right. He's just like giving, yeah.
Couple of things here. Incredibly cool moment that I wish I was able to see in person.
Sure, I'm with you. Especially on Halloween. It feels important. It's like seeing Santa Claus on Christmas. Right. You know what I mean?
It's the one time this ghost can travel these streets and perform with Motionless.
The stars align perfectly for this.
Balls was one of my fucking favorite members of this band.
Yeah.
I always remember being super, super sad when they departed the project. And I know 2017's technically 7 years ago, which is a long time ago, but you say 2017 and I'm like, man, I thought he left in like 2014.
It does feel like it's been an even longer time.
I didn't realize he was in the band for that long.
I believe he left right before Graveyard Shift.
Interesting.
Right.
Interesting.
And he was with the band from their like first EP up until that point.
Wasn't Graveyard Shift 2016?
Don't fuck with me on this. I'm not positive. I'm not positive now.
Because I thought Disguise was 2017.
Maybe it was Disguise then. Maybe it was Disguise.
Just saying.
Maybe it was like right after Graveyard Shift and right before Disguise or some shit like that.
Imagine they did this with TJ Bell instead.
It would be very funny. Yes, that would be very funny. With the departure of Phil Segroso, all members of As I Lay Dying have officially left the project with the exception of Tim Lambesis' new album, Through Storms Ahead, drops November 15th. This is how I'd start pitching this album. Every time a band member drops, they should just like, God, new album dropping 11/50. You know what I mean?
And then there were none other original members.
The one singular.
Well, and was this guy even ever original?
I think Phil was an original member, yes.
Crazy,
bro.
Crazy, Sam.
Everyone has abandoned Tim Lambesis up until this point. Everyone couldn't have happened to a better guy, of course. We've said on this show about we've said on this show a lot, of course.
Yeah, right.
It's incredibly unfortunate what has happened to Tim Lambesis.
I cannot believe that this band loses like 3 or 4 members last week.
Yeah.
And then ends on a fucking Dragon Ball Z cliffhanger. Next week, tune in to find out if Phil Segroso is going to fucking also depart this band.
And then next week, it's like at some point, As I Lay Dying is going to make a fucking statement, right?
Right.
About whatever happened. Phil also had that fucking marketing, like publicity, like PR speech of like, unfortunately, my morals have been compromised in this situation type beat.
Right.
So it's like I keep waiting for like a fucking police report to come out or something. Like, what is going on?
Right. That's why that's such a big, like, you know, you fucking raise your eyebrow at it. Cause it's like, well, you already kind of knew like the very public thing that you rejoined this band for when, you know, Tim was suddenly available to be a vocalist again.
Right. Again, it's like in the level of like, I can forgive trying to murder his wife. What do you do that then becomes unforgivable?
Right. Try it again.
Who fucking knows, dog? Who like that's the pro? Like who fucking knows? Linkin Park appears to already be working on new music per a recent video shared by Mike Shinoda on Instagram of vocalist Emily Armstrong in the recording booth.
In the booth?
Is it fucking insane that this band, before even dropping From Zero, would be dropping a clip showing Emily Armstrong back in the booth?
Yeah, bro. Arcane Season 2 hype starts now.
I love it.
More League of Legends partnerships.
Just the idea that this band is like fucking both feet on the gas, pedal to the metal, going right back into the swing of things as quickly and as hard as humanly possible is pretty impressive.
Well, I mean, with fucking good reason at this point, because you're right. Like, why even let up off the gas? You've got like 3 of the biggest songs in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
Go record some more songs. Have something ready for a deluxe album, assuming you don't already.
I'm deeply curious if this places as #1 album when it drops, or if anybody else is potentially dropping that could challenge them.
Only other things that could drop, bro. Young Thug.
I mean, a lot of hip hop and pop or country artists
like
could
out of
certainly
jail into
outperform
the studio.
This.
Young
Thug's the one that got out on probation.
Yeah.
He goes right back into the studio after that?
Did you read the probation stuff about Metro Atlanta?
No, what is that?
He's just like, bro, you can't go to Metro Atlanta for 12 years unless you're there on business, you're there for like a funeral, a wedding, a graduation. You also can't go unless you're performing like shows. Like, it was just like 9 asterisks, and I'm like, okay, so kind of whenever he wants he can go is what you're saying.
But as long as he's going for business and not pleasure, he's allowed to just come. Right, if he's performing, he's obviously allowed to go through that, which is interesting. Do you think Linkin Park could be one of these bands who snap back so quickly that like within a year and a half we're already on the next Emily album? Like, do you think they could go that fucking hard?
It would be crazy if that were the case. But like I'm saying, like, I don't know, like, it's just fucking keep striking while the iron's hot.
Surely this is like fucking February deluxe drop of the album with 2 more songs type thing.
You have to factor in though, like, man, obviously this band still has a ton of original members left, you know, it wasn't their choice to go on hiatus for like 7 years, right?
Right.
So like, maybe there's just like a lot of, you know, creativity, and like they just want to fucking keep going. They haven't been able to tour. They also it's not even like they've really toured. They've played like 4 or 5 dates, a couple more coming up. You know, you've got a fucking Sick New World and a fucking Sonic Temple. You have a couple festivals announced for next year.
They played the fucking League of Legends Worlds tournament today. They're playing Paris with Sleep Token tomorrow after we record this.
But like 3rd. No big massive tour announced yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. Here's my thought. I had another thought while we were talking here. Reanimation 2 with Young Thug. Could it work?
Yes.
Could it work? Could they make it happen?
Is it?
What about like a Lil Uzi Vert, who's like obviously fucks heavy with like the rock scene? Can you replicate the moment theoretically? Yep. Right? Yep. Like obviously there's a like large fucking amount of popular hip hop artists you could team up with.
It's got to be Young Thug.
It does feel like it has to be Young Thug.
Just like
give it the opportunity.
The moment. Right. Emily Armstrong back in the studio.
There's a lot of options.
What you didn't see is directly in front of her on another mic, Young Thug, right out of prison.
Kendrick's real hot right now. Like, you could team up with Linkin Park and they could write another Drake diss track.
Yeah, I guess Kendrick can, you know, like Linkin Park can maybe collaborate with Kendrick.
Right, or Tyler the Creator. He just dropped a brand new album. Like, he's back in it. Marco, sadly, Ithaca have announced they are disbanding. The band said in a statement posted to social media, quote, "There's been no falling out of creative differences. In fact, we're closer than ever. We've just no longer able to balance our life responsibilities with giving you the standard of art that you deserve. And feel like we've fulfilled more than our wildest dreams could have imagined in terms of where this band would take us. Now we're ready to put it to rest," unquote. Mark, this is sad. I think it's a band we discovered like just last year. So it really sucks to... Right, small band.
Been around for a minute, sure, but definitely had a pop, you know, a year or 2 ago, and suddenly a band we were pretty enamored with, and now we have to say goodbye, and that never feels great.
Yeah, 100%. And it's
disappointing.
It's like Whiplash, you know. It's like, Ithaca, they're a cool new band. I can't wait to see what they do next. Break up, cool. That sucks. Right. And then you find out they've been around since 2013. It's like, Well, I guess there's a lot of material I could go check out that clearly I was not aware of up until this point.
Yep.
Marcus, final thing here. My Chemical Romance officially celebrated 5 years since announcing they had reunited. Marcus, MCR5, we finally got there.
The funniest thing about this is it feels like they're ready for another hiatus at this point.
It does almost.
It's like, man, we came back. We played When We Were Young Fest a couple of times. We did a world tour.
We put out a song.
We put out one song. Like,
right.
It feels like they're tired now. Frankie Arrow's nonstop with fucking Anthony Green and the Dumb Fox, whatever the fuck that band's called.
Do you feel like... All right. Do you feel like you are encouraged to sabotage LS Dude's success to get Frank Iero back in the studio with My Chemical Romance?
Yes.
Like I don't want to take like drastic measures,
but I'm open to them.
But like if I could sync that band, right? for I mean, I heard multiple members voted for Trump, which is probably problematic if we really get into it.
Right. And you do not want to see what they were wearing for Halloween.
You do not want to see what they were wearing for Halloween. No, absolutely not. How many lies can we come up with on this show?
Careful. Yeah, fucking sued.
Oh yeah, no, I take that back. Joke,
right.
joke. Well, don't fucking go that far, Jesus.
No. Like allegations of Halloween costumes that were inappropriate is what I'm saying.
For me, allegations is like a word that's taken on a whole life of its own now, where it's like
it certainly has.
It means a singular thing to me, and it's fucking bad. As always, every link you need is in the description of this episode, including our socials, playlist, merch, and Discord. Subscribe to us on YouTube at SOTS Podcast YT. Subscribe. Subscribe
at SOTS Podcast YT, Sam.
Yeah, subscribe to us on YouTube at SOTS Podcast YT. Leave a thumbs up if you're watching the video version of this podcast, and comment whatever the fuck you want. I don't care. It just helps for engagement. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave 5 stars. Somebody asked this week if we were going to get back in the merch. Ask Marcos.
I'm trying, bro.
Ask Marcos. Dated discourse. Ghost have banned the use of cell phones during their 2025 World Tour performances. The band announced a world tour for 2025, marks lasting from April through September, and including this note on the official tour poster, quote, "This show will be a phone-free experience. Phones will be secured in yonder pouches. Guests maintain possession of their phones at all times," end quote. Apparently, this is not the first time the band has done this. According to Kerrang, they enforced a similar rule during the filming of their concert film Right Here, Right Now, though you could argue that experience was an entirely different situation. Fans were vocal about the decision. Twitter user Lay said, "Sorry, controversial opinion. Shit like this is so corny. Why are you trying to tell grown-ass adults what they can and cannot do with their phone at an event they've probably spent hundreds of dollars on?" Twitter user Eric chimed in, "I'm really sick and tired of people that hold phones above their heads recording the entire show. You're the ones that are ruining the concert experience and stuff like this happens. Quit crying about phone-free shows." Twitter user Sarah added, "This is defo the way forward. Just let people take a clip and a couple of pics like in the last song or something. It's completely ruining the atmosphere of shows when everyone's just stood there like a statue filming the whole bloody thing." And finally, Twitter user Chris added, "Ghost creates terrible, boring music. No phone to starve off the boredom seems like an unfair punishment." Marcus, thoughts?
I always like to go against the grain here and say that I fully support Ghost in this decision. I know a lot of people are pissed about this.
Yeah.
I feed off of that. I think that whatever makes people less happy, I'm so in support of.
Sure.
I don't know. So a couple of like things here. And I won't touch on it for long, but like we saw Chase Atlantic last night.
Yeah. We'll actually get into that in the Patreon.
Yeah. $3. And I don't think I've ever seen more phones in my entire life.
It was a lot of phones.
It wasn't the entire show.
Yeah.
But like at the onset, when that band first came on stage,
swimming in phones.
I'm pretty sure every single venue in every single person in the venue had their phone out. Besides us, I waited for like the second verse.
But do you notice?
Yes.
But does it affect your overall experience, or do you just sort of like it's become so normalized that like you just kind of move on?
A little bit. I do see a lot of people that are mostly conscious about it, and it's like when they're holding it, it's like it's either eye level or a couple of inches above their head.
Challenging.
But then you do have the people that it's like arm fully extended above their head. Other hand like waving around and like filming it and like not even watching what you're filming, just clearly just doing it for the sake of doing it. And like that I think is pretty annoying, and I'd love to see like definitely stop.
I mean, overall, like, do I think a show would be better if everyone wasn't holding up their phone? For me, certainly. Like,
right.
For me, who personally, like, I'm not in the habit of taking pictures or recording shows, so I do prefer a sea of not cell phones in front of me when I'm watching a show. I guess ideally this speaks to me, right? So like, this for me, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm into this. And do you think it's just the fact that like you have to be a certain size of band to get away with this type of shit?
I think you do, and we see this a lot with comedians, honestly.
This does happen a lot with comedians, but I'm pretty sure it's because they're scared of getting canceled and not because of stuff like recording their shows.
Right. But like you do see it, right? So, and I think that's like the Yonder pouch is like an official thing.
Yeah. Yeah, because I want to say they do that at the casino. Like when you go and like see a comedian, for example, like you'll put your phone in this little pouch. You can't fucking use it or anything. And then like they like unlock it on your way out or something. I think this obviously presents a lot of, you know, safety issues and stuff like that. And honestly, I really like Sarah's idea of like, hey, really communicate to your fans. Don't do that shit for like the first 10 songs, but like we do the last 3 songs, pull that shit out. I don't care. It's just like I'm not surprised people push back on this kind of stuff because I feel like we've allowed crowds to do just about whatever the fuck they want at this point. Yeah. That it's like the idea that telling them no, they can't do anything is like you remember no moshing signs? It's just like literally a joke. So in some capacity, like I feel like somebody would be like, oh, a no phone sign? Okay. Like I care. I'm going to do it anyway. So like, what does it matter?
There's also the part of me though, where it's like, and granted, I'm sure they had like a professional videographer that captured the moment, but like, there were a lot of like cool angles of, you know, the balls moment at the Motionless in White Apocalypse.
Sure, you do lose out on like content,
you miss
right?
out on a lot of cool moments like that.
You do wonder if the band does that intentionally so they can sort of control what they like give out to fans, right? Do you think it's something to the way that Ghosts shows must feel like, or the certain aura they want to capture, that like maybe for them in particular a phone is really diminishing of the experience? Like I'm trying to think if there's anyone in our scene, more in the alternative scene and less in like the metal scene, who also would make something like this happen where we would go, okay, well, I understand why from their perspective it would affect their show in particular. The analogous I always think of immediately is Sleep Token, because they're just like our version of Ghost ultimately.
Right. They're just like an artsier type band.
Right, precisely.
Maybe do want to try to connect more emotionally with the crowd and not just have phones reflecting back at them or whatever. But
a lot of artists, they do go like, hey, this phone is like, you've seen artists sort of like, hey, are you guys enjoying yourselves? Like it's hard to tell when you're just all holding your phones up and it's like, there's no crowd interaction. Well,
I thought the angle you were going to take is like every time a celebrity, like, you know, like a famous country singer is like grabbed a phone from a fan and just like fucking launched it.
Wait, well, that has happened, right?
Right.
I think it's unfortunate that this has become so normalized, because I think we all would enjoy shows more. But then I see a lot of comments of people being like, hey, you know, like part of my enjoyment in a show is being able to go back home and re-experience all of these things. So it's like, I don't know. I'm not going to lecture anybody on what they want to do, but it is interesting to see some artists push back on it.
Totally. And I think that it has to start somewhere, right? Someone's got to give it a go. And yeah. Sure, I'd like it to be Ghost because I don't have any fucking involvement whatsoever.
You're saying let Ghost take the hit on
their
this
fan
one?
Base, right?
Yeah. Marks, if you want to support the show, consider becoming a patron for exclusive content, the ability to submit questions, and producer credits on all of our video content. Patrons also receive access to bonus podcast SOTS Deluxe. On this week's Deluxe, Marks, we talk are experiencing Chase Atlantic live in Boston on their Lost in Heaven headlining tour with support from 24K Golden.
The day Lost in Heaven released.
Precisely correct. Patreon.com/SOTS podcast, Marcus. Questions this week. Melvin asks, which Chase Atlantis girl name song is your favorite? Cassie, Angeline, Molly, or Amy?
So my answer should be Amy, because that's the girlfriend's name.
Okay. But this is a hilarious but that's about to follow. Yeah.
But I'm always ride or die for Cassie.
Yeah,
right?
I'm right there with you.
That's such a good ass
Cassie.
song.
It's 100% Cassie.
I think I take that song over the rest of these.
You got to think Molly is probably a favorite, but part of me feels like Molly is not being utilized as a girl name in the context of that song.
It's not fully.
Maybe I misunderstood.
A bit of a double entendre there.
Right. Maybe I misunderstood. Just had a real great idea of how When We Were Young Fest could fix their no women problem. They could just have all the bands there who wrote a song with a woman's name.
They can only
play those songs, right?
Those songs,
and it's almost like women are there. Like... Jacob asks, would you guys ever consider doing a weekly Patreon review? Like, patrons suggest a new album to review and you randomly pull one or something? Maybe just miss RTS, but I like the idea. This is what's funny is that Jacob really has just repackaged RTS and is trying to like resell it back to us.
Yes.
Like it's a thing that we could still do.
So without more money from other people who aren't these patrons,
sure,
it's hard to dedicate more time to listening to more things without more money.
Interesting.
So maybe if we ever return to something like that, the listeners at home might have to give us more money.
We're done doing it for the love of the game. We're done. We're not doing it for the love of the game anymore. It's too much. Mark Strick182 asks, what's up with the Bring Me the Horizon tour? I love Next Gen and assumed a tour would follow. I know they put out dates for shows here and there overseas, but nothing in the U.S. since the album dropped. Marcus, thoughts?
I do not understand why we don't have shit announced yet.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I was having this conversation with you yesterday about whether we see Bring Me the Horizon overall maybe take some time away for a little bit. Like, it feels like that band has been like grinding their gears for a very long time without any time off.
Bro, Brazil got a tour before the States did on the new album cycle.
First time that's ever happened.
First time it's ever happened. And humanity. I could never imagine this band saying, all right, well, that's the promotion for the new album. No,
I mean, you forget the fucking Next Gen has been like a fucking 4-year process. Like, Die For Me has been played during shows. You know what I mean? Right. Like, they were playing some Next Gen songs on that tour with Fall Out Boy. Die For You. Yeah. What am I thinking of? The Chase song? Yeah. This band has been touring nonstop and they've been existing in the cycle of this new album in some capacity.
So what I'm saying is fucking, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, Bring Me, and play like 20 more dates, and then you can go on vacation for a while, all right? Can go on holiday, whatever we call it over in Britain.
They might be on Warped Tour. We can see if they're on Warped Tour. It might happen. Jake S. asks, what can Warped Tour do to compete with When We Were Young Festival?
Bring Me the Horizon. You just said it.
He says they're fucked, in my opinion. Kind of hard to top a Panic at the Disco reunion. Is there anyone else that can reunite that would excite the scene, Marcus? Is there anybody left to reunite that we could utilize as like the real... pinnacle of why you should go see Warped Tour?
There's really not. Between When We Were Young and Blue Ridge cannibalizing the idea of reunions, I don't know like what nowadays I would be excited over.
There's no one big enough. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's anyone big enough where
no
like
one left.
You could really move the needle, right?
Which is crazy,
right? Like we've joked,
they've accomplished a lot.
Get Every Time I Die back together, that would be insane. But I also don't think that's going to super move the needle in terms of like your sales or whatever. And then I don't know who's left.
So we haven't gotten 21 Pilots yet for When We Were Young, which means they might never play it, or they're the big headliner next year, or maybe they've always wanted to play Warped Tour, which I feel like maybe they haven't before.
No doubt.
Like...
The band.
Oh, yeah?
They played Warped Tour way back when it first started, and they're broken up. If they reunited for Warped Tour, I think that could do it.
They're broken up?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, you haven't noticed that Gwen Stefani has kind of a big career outside of them?
What is she up to?
Should
I know? I thought she was just Gwen Stefani, like outside of...
What do you mean? What do you mean she's just Gwen Stefani? What does that even mean? I don't even know what to do with that.
I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen a Gwen Stefani chart topper.
I don't know what she's up to, honestly, but she's doing things.
No, back everything up, Sam. Yeah.
I want to say she's on one of these like America Got Talent shows or The Voice or something, but I think I'm wrong about that.
You might be right. I don't know.
It's hard to say. I haven't kept up with Gwen Stefani's career. I just know No Doubt is not around.
Not a conversation I expected to have this year.
Yeah, me either. I don't know. I think Warped Tour is in kind of like a tough place in terms of like matching something as like spectacular. But you got to wonder to yourself, if they just got My Chemical Romance, would people be as excited to see them next year as they even would a Panic reunion?
And I guess the only thing with Warped is like they could potentially just do all these smaller bands that were announced for this at the Washington date and at least said they did it first. But like, I'm curious if When We Were Young at this point now might have like a big no Warped Tour clause in the contract.
I don't know, because part of me still feels like a lot of like the same people are like working with the same artists here. It's like, I don't know if management for a lot of these bands would rush to say, okay, we're going to sign you for this, and then you can't play any of these festivals where you would also be able to make a lot of money. Like, I'm not entirely sure. I understand like regional conflicts, but like if one's in DC and the other's in Vegas, I don't even know that they're really competing with each other to some capacity. Caillou asks, if you could join a band for a whole tour, which band would it be?
Band for the whole tour, which one would it be?
Yeah. Am I like in the green room and stuff? Like, am I that tight, or am I just like following them for a whole tour?
Because it's different answers.
Right.
Different answers. I'm gonna be real, bro.
Yeah.
I'm hanging out with Blink-182.
You're gonna hang out with Blink-182, huh? There's not like too much star power there for you. You don't think that's...
No, that's why, bro. I gotta get like accustomed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like there'll be a lot of pressure on me.
No, bro, like if I'm back there like all access pass, like I'm just like honestly shadowing Travis Barker all day until he hates me.
I'm kind of with you on the
all
idea
day and night
that I would want to go with a band that has like a real large amount of money behind their
you get to see I'm on a jet every day.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
You get to see a cool ass show every night.
I'm on good accommodations, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like I don't want to hang out. I'm not sleeping
I got a hotel room.
I'm not sleeping in the van. Like right. I'm going on tour with like, you think it'd be fun to go on tour with like Korn or something? Like one of these really big rock bands?
Even probably
Slipknot. I just get lost in the crowd.
Actually, my answer is definitely if they do in fact return, especially beforehand for a tour, Panic at the Disco, because if the boys are back together, then you're there for like the ultimate vibes.
Okay.
But if it's just like Brendan Urie, to be not even a fly on the wall, but to exist in that room through everything would be fascinating. I'm with you there. Like there are some more interesting choices. That's for sure. What's it like in the green room for Linkin Park right now? Like vibes are immaculate.
Right. But I want to know personally.
Yes.
Heather asked, favorite Halloween song in the scene?
I think it's Under the Head by Motionless in White.
Okay. Is that Halloween?
Just like the Sleepy Hollow song.
Okay, so I can't just pick like any Motionless song. I have to pick a song that is explicitly Halloween.
That's how I would approach it.
That's how you'd approach it, huh?
Yeah.
I feel like that's more difficult. I guess Stabbing in the Dark then, which is technically
it's
about the
literally
movie
a Halloween song.
Right. Marcus, and finally, Andrew asked, did you do anything fun for Halloween? Did you guys dress up?
I didn't do anything. I actually brought the dog on a walk when I thought trick-or-treating would start happening.
Okay.
And just saw the emptiest, like, just neighborhood I've ever seen in my life.
Trick-or-treating's dead. Trick-or-treating, nobody does it anymore. Yeah, it's Jover. That's precisely correct. I don't know what happened to it, but I didn't dress up either. I did watch a horror movie, though. So, like, for me, that's my Halloween. I feel like Halloween just fucking, like, it went by too quickly. Like, usually Halloween is, like, a month-long celebration for, like, me and my fiance. And I feel like I blinked and it was over and I missed it. And now I'm kind of sad about it.
Yeah, I didn't get to, like, rewatch a lot of, like, the regular stuff you'd want to rewatch. Like, Trick-or-Treat around this time of year.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, I don't know. And then now you've got November and it's supposed to be Christmas already. And it's like, I don't know. Part of me like does eventually like watching a lot of those, like especially like the more nostalgic stuff like Santa Claus and Santa Claus 2 or whatever. But I'm in no rush.
Yeah, it feels like too soon to jump into Christmas.
And that's how I
feel like I just got started
right?
on Halloween, right?
Yeah, that's how we celebrate holidays. It's mostly like through movies.
Yeah, precisely correct. Yeah, it's been a while since I dressed up. I'm sorry, guys. New music this week. Avoid have returned with new song "Burn." The single came alongside the announcement the band have signed to UNFD Records, home to Invent Animate, Like Moss to Flame, Silverstein, and more. It's the band's first new music since the release of 2022 full-length album, Cult Mentality. Vocalist Benny Scholl on the new song, quote, "Personally, I feel like this is a great representation of a more mature version of our sound. We've been hard at work with these new tunes for the past couple of years now, and I couldn't think of a better way to introduce the next era of Void than this. Burn is a song about the internal battles we face sometimes. I feel like, especially as an artist, but really just as people in general, we all have our own experiences of facing the highest of highs and also the lowest of lows. And sometimes I think we all just want to set it off, let it all burn." How about that for a little lyrical callback? That's included in the quote, by the way. I hope this song can be a positive light for everyone, but especially anyone that might be going through it a little bit right now. Burn is honestly the most excited I've ever been to release a new song. I remember when guitarist Chris Eccles and I were tracking the demo vocals in our tiny little apartment at like 1 a.m. annoying all our neighbors and not even remotely caring because I was so beyond stoked with what we were coming up with. I hope you all enjoy jamming it as much as we did making it. End quote. Avoid currently stand at 95,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. Mark's thoughts on the new track?
Burn's fucking good.
Burn's solid.
I've had a big itch for this band and new material for a while now. 2022 feels like eons ago.
Feels like an eternity. Yeah.
Cult Mentality, good album, enjoyed it, but like have been just like ready for this band to keep upping, you know,
the ante.
Keep upping the ante, keep leveling up. And I think that this is, you know, alongside, you know, hey, new label, all that. Very exciting times to be an Avoid fan. And I'm listening to the song. I'm watching this video. I'm happy with all of it. Definitely happy with it.
I'm especially happy with the video. I think Avoid are performers, and they have a charm that is undeniable. And I'm always, honestly, more excited to watch their music videos than I am to listen to their songs. Not because I don't think their songs are good, but just because their music videos are so especially good.
Yes.
And there's a lot of great moments in this one in particular.
UNFD feels like a good home for them as well.
You know, it's interesting because I see bands get signed to UNFD now, and I remember back like a couple months ago when we were talking about like that whole thing where it's like, did Epitaph like pick up some of UNFD? And I felt like I was kind of left like nebulous about that whole thing, and like now I'm still unsure.
We may never get that answer.
But yeah, I think this will work well for them. Obviously, there are a lot of great bands on that label. Blood Command have released a new single, We Could Be Heaven.
She is the girl I always wanted. In all my dreams, she gets me haunted. I'm getting used to being taunted. We could be heaven, but you don't know.
The new song coincides with the self-described death pop band's official signing to a rising empire, home to the likes of Future Palace, Of Virtue, Resolve, and more. The song follows up 2023 full-length album World Domination, per the official press release. Quote, Blood Command's latest single, We Could Be Heaven, delivers a dark pop-punk punch, exploring the cost of following one's heart, even to one's demise. As the first taste of their upcoming 2025 album, this track may be Blood Command's catchiest, most pop-forward release yet, setting the stage for an album that promises to elevate their revolutionary sound to new heights, end quote. The band currently set at approximately 57,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. Mark, have you heard of Blood Command before today?
I haven't, truthfully. But watching this video, listening to this song, I am a new fan. They gained a fan. And we talk a lot about like charm earlier, just a second ago with Avoid, and I think that this band's got a lot of charm as well. And it's one of the bigger things that appealed to me watching this video. Is just this band was clearly having a lot of fun. They're like in some fuck ass old ass town playing inside like fucking Stonehenge.
Yeah, like a garden or something like that.
And they're all decked out in like Adidas gear, 3 stripes, like head to toe. And
they're
it's a lot of
deeply
fun.
silly in a way that like some bands in this scene have made deeply silly their whole personality, and I really stand behind them for it. Like Avoid, like Ocean Grove, like who's that band we talked about just last week? We reviewed their album.
Last week,
Mark.
Why
we
the
reviewed
fuck
their
can't I
album.
remember?
Metalcore singers live at home with their parents. Drag. Like, there are so many good bands like that, and like now we've slotted in another one where it's like, yes, everybody wearing like strictly Adidas and being as goofy and ridiculous as possible.
Tracksuits, like full tracksuits.
Dancing around, like just like breaking down into these riffs, and the fact that this whole song feels like some sort of like weird amalgamation of like Green Day meets Blink-182. And it's deeply catchy. I'm really excited for this signing for a Rising Empire. I think they got a bright future ahead of them. No Cure have dropped new single Don't Need Your Help, featuring Jessica Clarke of Wielded Steel and Nick Chance of Beautiful Child of God. The band also announced they're signing to Sharp Tone Records, home to Alpha Wolf, Dying Wish, Holding Absence, and more. New EP, I Hope I Die Here, drops December 6th. It's fall 2023 EP, The Commitment to Permanence. The EP will include features from Gideon, My Children, My Bride, and more. Blythe Stewart, vocalist, on the single. Quote, Don't Need Your Help is about my touring experience throughout the country and learning that many people still view the Southeast through a lens of negativity. The meaning behind the song is broad in the sense that it certainly acknowledges the painful past of the region, but it also makes clear that it doesn't help anyone to continue shitting on the current people here that only want to make it a better place for everyone. It was critically important to me to have two of my closest friends sing on this song. The first being Nick Chance, Beautiful Child of God, and also Jessica Clarke, Wielded Steel. Both of them have shared these kinds of experiences as well. Overall, it is a extremely overstimulating and hard-hitting track, and I can't wait to rip it live, end quote. The band on the EP, quote, every track features someone that has made an undeniable mark on Alabama hardcore over the years. We do not expect you to recognize every name on the record, and that's the point. I Hope I Die Here is a love letter to Alabama and the Southeastern experience. It's an acknowledgement of suffering and a proclamation of strength. The record is conceptually driven and more musically diverse than our previous EPs on purpose. There is a distinct reason for each song to exist. We approach many topics, including what it's like to grow up under the boot of religion, fraternity culture, the dark side of a beloved landmark, local ecological exploitation, and more. We do not believe the world needs any more songs about how crazy of a guy you are, how much you hate your town, or how your ex was such a, checks notes, bitch for breaking up with you because you cheated on her, end quote. Insane call out to the pop punk community right now. The band were releasing in the news, Marcos, after members vocalist Blythe Stewart and bassist Jake Murnane were stabbed while trying to break up a fight at a bar after one of their shows. No Cure currently hold just shy of 30,000 monthly listeners on Spotify.
I did not make the connection that was this
You
band.
didn't realize it was this fucking band. I knew it immediately.
That was this band.
I knew it immediately. Sharptone saw how they could fight, signed them on the spot.
Hope they are feeling better after that recent incident.
Sure.
I'm feeling better after listening to this track, Sam. I enjoyed it a whole bunch. They're not wrong, though, when they say it's fucking an attack on the senses, however they phrased it earlier. The song like starts and does not stop until it ends, as far as like beating you over the head or maybe stabbing you.
Extremely abrasive.
Right.
Too soon for the stabbing joke.
Extremely abrasive. I was just testing the waters. They survived. So, yeah, I think this band's really neat. I love everything lore-wise about, how this
conceptually this is very fascinating.
Came to exist. Why it includes the people on it that it includes. And initially, like, none of that dawns on me. I'm seeing like Gideon, and I'm like, all right, this band's fucking hard.
Right, you're just clocking artists you like, right? Nick Chance, I feel like we talked about recently, having done a song with Salt Wound, who was also on Sharp Tone Records. And at the time, we were like, are they just like a photographer? Like, what's their deal? Are they just hopping on this song? And they are a vocalist. Like, it wasn't just some funny coincidence. And it's fun to see their name pop up a second time in as many weeks.
I was just thinking I would love for a band to start listing, like, not only is this person the vocalist of our band, they're also the photographer. Like how it's like, keyboards, vocals, fucking backing vocals.
Right, creative director. That's like how Joe Hahn is like listed for Linkin Park. It's like creative director, keyboardist.
Right.
Yeah, I'm really excited about what this band is doing next. I think this is a great signing for Sharp Tone. I think this is arguably right up there with like Dying Wish is like one of the heaviest acts on their label.
Really excited to dig into each of those songs too. Like as far as, touching on local fucking ecological exploitation and the dark history of fucking monuments across towns and stuff like that. Like really just interested in what this band has to say.
And I'm not gonna lie, this whole getting into a bar fight and getting stabbed thing does make them one of the hardest bands in this fucking
You get points
scene.
for that.
It's not even close. Marcus, and finally, Senna have hit us with a new song, Rain. This marks the band's first new single since the release of 2022 debut EP, A Moment of Quiet. Vocalist Simon Maggi on the new track. Quote, this song is about how alive you feel when you are with that one special person. Like nothing else matters, and you are lifted beyond the ordinary. There is this perfect sync between each other, a warmth that just ignites everything, end quote. Additionally, guitarist Marcel Duer adds, quote, it's not your typical slow and melancholic love song. Knowing where Simon wanted to take the song lyrically, I knew the instrumentation had to match the higher energy. I wanted to write a song that makes you want to dance and celebrate, but still feels intimate and familiar, end quote. Senna currently claims 16,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. Mark, so much to think of the song so we can talk about this music video.
Song's cool. Let's get into the fucking video.
All right, so
not only did they want to lyrically knew the instrumentation had to like fucking match the higher energy, they knew the video had to fucking match how insane, like the lore had to match the insanity of the video.
But they cooked even harder than we ever thought they would have had to for a song like this, because like for all intents and purposes, you're kind of watching this video and it's like, yeah, the vibes of this are matching the song. Yeah,
it's like a couple. They're on like a little retreat at a river, like in the cabin type thing.
Right, and at one point the girlfriend is like suntanning like on a boat, and she looks up, she's like, what the fuck happened to my boyfriend? And she's like, oh my god, he hasn't come up for air. Oh my god.
Yeah.
And she's looking around, she's like, oh fuck.
Like the water is still all around, but the boyfriend's not there. So immediately mind jumps to, did he drown?
Right. And
how long was I, did I fall asleep while I was suntanning?
We get like 7 verses before like anything happens. Like this is like, right. And then suddenly he pops up and it's like, it's just a joke. This is hilarious. And we're like, all right, it feels like there's a slightly weird vibe shift here, but we're going to keep going with it. But then it kind of keeps happening where it's like, he keeps just like jumping out of nowhere and scaring her for no reason. Or like, it looks like he's sitting somewhere, but then he walks in the door somewhere else. And then like the whole song has this like hard stop. And then they're sitting by the lake and she's like, something, how are you? And he's like, I don't know, something. Have you ever heard of this book?
Right.
And she's like, what's it about? And he's like, it's a guy who keeps reading the book. Otherwise he feels like he'll cease to exist. And she's like, so it's a story of believing?
Right.
And then smash cut. She's sitting alone in her room. Did any of this really happen? Out of nowhere, to be continued. I was like, what the fuck? Why did this band cook so hard on this?
So this crazy like emotional roller coaster, like fucking ending that like now it's to be continued. Yeah. So like just really crazy video, I had to tell.
It was fucking crazy. It was like it just came out of nowhere. It was really fascinating. Glad to have Senna back, by the way. I really liked this band when they came onto the scene, and they kind of disappeared for a little bit. So it's nice that they didn't go away permanently.
They've been cooking.
They're here again.
The Breakdown.
Marcos, let's review the brand new album from Make Them Suffer.
It's a self-titled. Key bullets here at the top. Make Them Suffer are an outfit from Perth, Australia that formed 16 years ago in 2008. The self-titled record is their 5th studio album, and it releases the 8th of November. So not quite out yet, but out the Friday that you were listening to this episode.
So
the band have been signed to Sharptone Records since May of last year, previously having been with Rise Records for a number of years before that. Make Them Suffer is the band's first full-length album with keyboardist and vocalist Alex Reed, formerly of Drown This City, who joined the band back in October of 2022 following the dismissal of Book and Isle earlier in that same year. The album was self-produced by guitarist Nick McLernan alongside returning collaborator Jeff Dunn. He's worked with Disturbed, Ice Nine Kills, Fit for a King, etc. He helped engineer, mix, and master this project. Make Them Suffer is the follow-up to 2020's How to Survive a Funeral. And lastly, because we here at the SOTS podcast like numbers, the band currently sit at an impressive 1 milli monthly listeners over on Spotify.
Clean.
Which is the only place that we think is important. Supports from the band on the
matters
new album.
Most to us personally.
Right.
Yes.
Fuck Apple Music. Some words from the band on this new album. When we first started out, we were pretty much just a deathcore band, and that sounded really suited. That sound really suited the band's name, said vocalist Sean Harmanis. When we got to Old Souls and then even Worlds Apart, it felt sonically to me as if we were moving away from that name. With this album, I do feel like we've come full circle. It's fitting that this is our self-titled record, and I think it's the truest representation of who Make Them Suffer is as a band. It's Make Them Suffer's greatest hits, except they're all new songs, Sean laughs. But in all seriousness, there's a lot of eyes and ears on this record. We definitely had something to prove with this album, and I think we've achieved that. But this release will be a test as to whether the hype and growth actually translates into ticket sales and things like that. There's definitely pressure on us, and we really felt that we had to step up the game across the board. You never know what will happen, adds guitarist McLernan. You don't know if another COVID is going to happen, and you don't know if a band is going to be able to sustain themselves off of their next record. We're at this point where we have to prove ourselves with this album, and there's the accompanying fear of taking a step back or stagnating. Every band has that same anxiety in their own way. Everybody wants to move forward. The end product of this album is the amalgamation of all of our years of hard work, experimentation, and experience, Harmanis concludes. It represents a new chapter, but it's also one that we've been building and working towards for our entire career. So let's rewind a little bit. Tracing its origins back to 2022, this new Make Them Suffer era was first set in motion by the announcement of the band joining forces, as we mentioned earlier, with Alex Reed, who took up the role of backing vocalist and keyboardist. The band also says is the trademark fifth member. That has been a revolving door in the past. Between the acclaimed release of Doom Switch, the first single with Alex Reed, a solidified lineup, and the return of international touring in a post-pandemic reality, a double-edged sword soon emerged over the influx of opportunities unexpectedly affecting Make Them Suffer's timeline for actually writing and cementing the release timeline for album number 5. The band had this to say about that. We've been doing a lot of touring consistently for the past 2 years. That's McLernan who says that. And there wasn't really any proper time around these tours to actually stop to write the album. We had a window before we toured with Parkway Drive where we were able to be like, okay, we have to put these songs together now. But in the lead up to that, it was just riff banking, recording riffs, and putting samples and raw ideas in the scrapbook. All of the touring that happened post-lockdown created a very different writing environment, and that also impacted when and how we released new music. We actually wrote vocals while we were in Portland, shares McLernan. That's where Jeff Dunn's studio is. Everything was recorded in that 2-week period, and then the mixing would be done over the course of the year. This is definitely an album inspired by the current world, McLernan reveals. We used to be like, oh, we should write riffs like this band, or we should try to sound like this. Now we just write whatever we think sounds good, and our influences just come from life, the shit trying to stop you in your tracks and trying to bring you down. For us, especially during COVID, with changing band members, not being able to tour, everybody else was starting to get back on tour, but we weren't able to tour until very late in the game. At the time, a lot of the guys in our band were in Western Australia, which made things a lot harder due to their restrictions there. And I think that made us a bit angrier, which definitely influenced the overall album, which at this point, Sam, we're pretty much ready to discuss. What are your thoughts on it? Make Them Suffer's self-titled album. It comes out this Friday. What do you think?
I'm of two minds on this. One of them is that I do think Make Them Suffer overall has ostensibly looked at their last two albums and reinvigorated their energy just in terms of how aggressive they are. So when this band says, hey, we wanted to kind of go back to our deathcore style, I do think they accomplished that with the vast majority of these songs. It definitely feels like we've cranked everything way the fuck back up. And you could feel that with the initial single Doom Switch, but it's been consistent since. Ghost of Me, Oscillator, Man of God. Like, all of these songs are ostensibly very similar in that they're just very, very aggressive. Deathcore feels like a step too far, but I would say it's on the furthest end of the spectrum of metalcore as far as I'm concerned. Probably just... I'm right there
with you.
For the most part, it's because we swing back into the clean choruses, which I feel like is something that a deathcore band would just forego entirely.
And
right?
even then,
but we're splitting hairs.
With a lot of like the instrumentation, there's still a lot more like melody there than you would expect from many deathcore bands. And even when this band was a deathcore band around like the Old Souls and an earlier era, they still had electronic flourishes like that would make them a little bit more digestible for someone who was maybe entirely into that genre. But yeah, I think a step too far would be calling this deathcore, but it's closer than it's been in a while.
So I do feel like this band to a degree has accomplished what they've set out to do. And then the other half of me feels slightly underwhelmed because I think that overall, this is a case where I heard in advance all of the best songs off of this record and feel a little bit like, with the singular exception of No Hard Feelings for me personally, which is a song that Alex essentially leads and is one of the softer songs on the album, that the rest of the songs do not quite measure up, and that there is also a slight, and I don't know if I find this to be entirely a negative, repetitiveness to the style. And I think I noticed it most when I was listening to Oscillator, Doom Switch, and Man of God, where it's to say that
they all come in a row.
This band does find a pocket here where they have a style that they're very good at, but there feels like there's a little bit of a formula to it that I notice more than I want to. I almost want to have the rug pulled out from under, or I want to have the shade drawn over me and not notice sometimes when a band is sort of like doing what would be like their signature style, but in a way that doesn't feel obvious. And sometimes on this album, it just feels like a little obvious in terms of like, we're hitting the mosh call out, we're hitting the breakdown, we're dropping in the electronics, we're hitting the clean chorus, repeating it a couple times, and then like calling it a day. And then I think in the instances where this band doesn't quite measure up, it's just that like some of these songs received the riffs that were a little less compelling, or the hooks that weren't quite as strong, or the electronic element that didn't really work for me as well as they do in the singles, where it's this reminds me a lot of the Spirit Box album from Eternal Blue, where it's like, I looked at that album and said, I do feel like overall, yes, the rest of the songs do not measure up to the singles, but when the singles are this strong, do they carry the whole album on their own? And that's kind of where I'm sitting with Make Them Suffer a little bit. It's like, there's not a bad album that exists that's going to have Doom Switch and Ghost of Me on it, and Oscillator and Man of God. Like, these singles are fucking phenomenal, but I do think that they certainly deeply overshadow the other songs on the record.
I'm going to stop you there. I've got a number of things I want to agree on with you on, and some things I want to push back on.
Yeah.
So the things that I'm going to push back on.
Okay.
I think that this is the best Make Them Suffer album since Old Souls, which I feel like you wouldn't agree with.
I was relatively fond of How to Survive a Funeral.
Yeah, I think that album also had some excellent songs, but in its entirety didn't fully work for me in a way that, and you know, it's just an album I also haven't revisited in a long while, which I think speaks volumes to maybe how I felt about it. And I don't know if originally at the time when we reviewed that one, if I properly communicated that I was a little disappointed with it, but I think looking back on it now, that's how I do truly feel about that record. Still like it, again, like some good songs on there, but like not my favorite by any means. So heading into this album, I'm looking for a good one. And I do think that they delivered on that. And you did hit the nail on the head, Sam. A record that has Oscillator and Doom Switch. Honestly, just this band's like two best songs.
Yeah, right. And I wouldn't.
Not going to be a bad album.
Pretty fucking high up there too, for what it's worth.
Kind of semi-related side note. Doom Switch, for the longest time, this band's most streamed track on Spotify, like just under 20 million, recently surpassed by Ghost of Me, which I thought was really crazy.
That does seem crazy because I feel like Doom Switch would go down in history as this band's biggest song. So yeah,
exactly. So you have those tracks, and one of the things I wanted to push back on earlier is that you said this band had released all of their best songs prior to this album coming out, and one of the reasons I want to push back is it's not your fault, but I was listening to this album like 3-4 weeks ago before Mana God came out. And I'm like, okay, this song's fucking nuts. It's going to hit when like other people start fucking hearing this. And it just happened also to be a single. And then yes, No Hard Feelings is a massive standout on this record. I have a really great time with that track. Seeing Alex sort of take the lead was awesome, especially when they take a back seat on Mana God and are essentially just screaming fuck and yeah every 30 seconds on that song. And it's mostly just a Sean song. Thought that was super cool.
I get that. So we could say that my listening experience was theoretically marginally tainted
Slightly
by
different.
how I took in the record, but that's going to be most people's listening experience.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But I do think that there's some definite positive things to be said about Venusian Blues, which is like a bit more of a new metal, you know, make them suffer than we've ever had. And I liked Tether personally. It does follow a lot of the same.
Tether ends really cool.
It ends so cool.
But I think the song that happens prior to the ending is just okay. The more I look at the track listing, I think a big thing that I get hung up on is that the warning is a little underwhelming as an intro. And
the warning is super. That's got to be the biggest miss for me on this entire album is just the warning comes and goes, and it doesn't even like lead into the into Weaponized that well.
It's nowhere nearly as hype of an intro as you could have had.
Yep.
And then Weaponized, I think, is just okay. So we kind of have like a soft entrance. And then I feel like we have a soft exit too, where I think Small Town Syndrome just doesn't really match up either.
I don't disagree with that.
So it's like we're almost following this exact playbook of where we could really craft this incredible record. And the two instances where we pivot, we don't really do anything experimental. We just sort of underwhelm slightly, where we don't get this really hype intro. We don't get this massive closer. We just kind of get like the soft entrance and exit with like the real exciting meat of everything being the vast majority of the center. Though, you know, again, I still argue that like Venusian Blues and Weaponized they're just okay. And they pale significantly in comparison to like the singles.
But so, I mean, and that's one of the things about this album too, right? Is its release has been staggered single wise. Like Doom Switch is a 2-year-old song that passed the 2-year mark in October, this past month. And we've had a slow, steady feed ever since. Epitaph was a single. Ghost of Me is single. Obviously, Oscillator, Mana God, also singles. We've heard a good bulk of this album. We heard 50% of it prior to it releasing. So yes, at some point, like just like law of averages, at some point the songs that aren't singles might not be as good as the singles because
I mean, here's the thing
band
overall,
knows what
though,
they're
it's
working
like,
with, right?
You know, you think about that Bring Me the Horizon album from earlier in the year. We were all sitting there and we were going, damn, we've heard half of this album already. We've heard 90% of this album already. But there ended up being a lot of exciting surprises and stuff in there. And it's like, that's where this sort of lacks a little bit. There's nothing here that's quite surprising. It just feels a little bit like enough songs by adding a couple that just didn't hit nearly as hard to fill out the rest of the album. And I'm really nitpicking here because like the vast majority of this album is very good, right? It's just, there was like, it's almost like that missed opportunity where it's like perfection is within eyesight. And it's like, we just didn't quite get there. Now the question becomes like, I don't like the way Make Them Suffer set this up where it's like, if this album doesn't do it, we're done. Where it really does feel like, listen, if this album doesn't hit, it's over.
Well, I mean, not even that. They said there's a lot of pressure, a lot of eyes on this one. So.
And I feel like they do enough where it's like, I think you'll be okay. I certainly think you'll be okay. Like, this is a mostly very good
I do want to
album.
push back on that, like, tone there. I think this album is really great. I think it's one of the better metalcore albums I've heard this year. And like, better feels like not as complimentary as it could there, but like, I think this year hasn't had incredible metalcore releases. This is one of them.
Right. It does feel like Make Them Suffer stepped up then.
Make Them Suffer are clearly like ceiling is much higher than so many bands in this scene. And they're consistently operating around that ceiling.
Mm-hmm. They're a veteran talent. Absolutely. Yeah. I think my biggest takeaway from this album ultimately is like how critical that fifth member is for this band, where Alex coming in to this project is so important to, I think, the overall success of this. And it's so funny to me how consistently this seems to happen with metalcore acts in particular, where a keyboardist is not a novelty so much as it turns out a critical component to creating some of the best in the genre. And it's just funny to me that like we keep going through this cycle where it's like bands like will drop and then pick them back up again and like reinvest in them. And it's so funny that like
Motionless in White just this week alone.
All right. Well, I mean, we'll see where
they
that
brought
goes.
him back for a couple songs. They knew it would be better.
But you think of like recently with like Prada and how much like our appreciation for that band shifted dramatically when like they brought in a keyboardist who like was
full time again. Yeah.
Entirely like critical to like a lot of what they were doing. And I think so much of the electronics in this album, but not just that, the vocals from Alex in particular are like a huge part of what works so well about it.
Alex is the X factor on this album. However many flowers they get regarding their performance on this album is not enough. They are one of the coolest, like, as far as like getting the spotlight on them suddenly. Drown the City, you know, I don't even think I ever checked
Not
out.
a project I was really familiar with.
Right.
No.
And, you know, suddenly being shoved into the spotlight here, replacing bigger shoes talent wise, as far as, you know, a lot of people did like Booka in this band. They left for some pretty shitty reasons, of course. So not
I
really
was going to
missed.
say, it's like you did have big shoes to fill with Booka. Like Booka wasn't fired for performance reasons, right?
Not at all.
Like they were fired for you know, the allegations that came out against them. And they were like a valuable and very talented part of the band. So you're coming in and you're trying
I'm
to fill
sure this
those
band
shoes.
was not thrilled to have to move on. Like, obviously, you know, a lot of member changes previously, but like they bring in Booka. A lot of people love having them in this band. And then I think it was like they just had a song between How to Survive a Funeral before kicking her out with Courtney LaPlante. And
yeah,
like
that's right.
that was very clearly like probably like a lead single to another album that I'm sure they had to scrap a lot of work on, right?
Mm. Right, so it's almost like a gift that they would then go find someone who's equally, if not, you know, maybe in some ways more talented. So it's like,
and have completely rejuvenated my love for this band. I think that Alex is not only a key addition, but like now one of my favorite parts of this band, and they fucking shine so frequently on this album, whether it is vocally or it is electronically. Like, so much cool stuff is happening specifically on No Hard Feelings Tether. Of course, we know Doom Switch and Oscillator, all the cool shit that's going down.
Ghost to me has got that crazy, like, it's almost like a ping pong sort of like electronic noise that like happens in that song.
Well, she's also like that whole fucking like abandon the ghost of like all that stuff at the very end of that song is so cool. The build on that track. So like as much as you can take away from this record, you know, underwhelming opening, underwhelming closer, there's so much good happening. And granted, we have heard all of it, but like finally housed on one album, this record has Oscillator, Doom Switch, Man of God, Ghost of Me. People have yet to hear it. No Hard Feelings. These songs are fucking not only some of the best Make Them Suffer songs in general, but some of the best metalcore songs I've heard in such a long time, period. Doom Switch, it might be like if Doomsday and fucking a handful of Bring Me the Horizon songs didn't exist, that could be the best metalcore song ever.
I'm right there with you. I'm 100% right there with you. I think it was our song of the year last year.
Yeah.
I think this is one of those cases where it's like my expectations were like skyrocketed by the fact that these songs were so incredible, right? And I'm a little bit a victim of those expectations.
Make
right?
them suffer. You heard it here, folks. Too good for their own good.
So like overall, I would recommend checking this album out. I don't think it quite hit the astoundingly high expectations I had for it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are going to love this album, so that's all I have to say on it.
Marcus, before we get out of here, we checked out a couple other albums. A Piece of Me, I Never Let You Find by Cane Hill. This is the Louisiana Outfit's third studio album, released the 1st of November via Out of Line Music. Piece of Me, I Never Let You Find, it's 12 tracks, and is the band's first LP in 6 years, following up 2018's Too Far Gone, and a few EPs that released between 2019 and 2022. Marks, what were your overall feelings on this?
Cane Hill fucking rock, man. This album exceeded all expectations I had, and I did have some. I loved a lot of the singles, The Midnight Sun, Fade, Drowning Therapy we got semi recently, I want to say. And I think that this band not only delivered on a lot of the expectations that I had and a lot of other people had, but like, I think have truly leveled up.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Their finest work, respectfully, by a wide margin. And this is coming from someone who, ever since that record that had come out, with every EP had gained so much adoration for this band since.
It feels like we've been workshopping a sound that finally got us to this exact point where we've nailed it.
Yeah, and I think that this is, again, the best collection of their work. I think that both of the Elijahs truly do shine on this record. Elijah Witt as a vocalist sounds like fucking serene at times, like on like angelic almost on a lot of these
deeply
choruses.
Unique delivery versus a lot of other vocalists within the metalcore scene.
Yeah, and I think on tracks like probably
I think an incredible juxtaposition of what he's able to accomplish is Eye to Eye and How Could You Lose.
Yeah, I think
where you get both ends of the spectrum.
Yep. Really impressive. And then like, you know, How Could You Lose? Like a lot of cool guitar work from the other Elijah in this band, their guitarist. But that's all over the place, right? Like the guitarists are so fucking cool throughout this album. Mm-hmm. It's got a lot of big riffs. It's got a lot of big moments in general. And that's not really something I associated Cane Hill with in the past, but like the moments that hit on this album truly do fucking hit like a brick. And their counter, like, you know, weighed with like these really pretty hooks that I didn't realize this band actually had in them. And I walk away from this album really impressed with this band, really further enamored by them. I think that they're a really talented group of guys.
I mirror all those thoughts entirely. I think this is like a beautiful tapestry of haunting soundscapes that are spread across the entirety of this album that are meant to capture almost like this overall feeling of dreaming that collides with the other side being a nightmare, and the way that they sort of like clash and fight each other throughout the entirety of this record. And there are these really beautiful moments where the band, in something like track 7, The Sound of Roses in Bloom, they use solely those soundscapes and there's no vocals and it's strictly an instrumental to just sort of like keep that feeling in motion.
Yep.
And I think it's really quite beautiful. And I think that the lyricism taps into that as well. A particular standout for me is Drowning Therapy, where they're essentially talking about being baptized and having their sins forgiven, but then getting caught in this loop of sort of falling back into sin and then only to have them forgiven and then sort of like go around and around again. But then something like Permanence in Sleep feels like it talks a little bit more to this sort of idea that like you're haunted by like these dreams and how they collide with these nightmares. I think there's a lot of depth and story to be found within this record that I would need more time overall with to pull exactly what the band is trying to get across. But you can tell that they've really taken a lot of the emotions of this album and framed it in these really beautiful ways that makes listening to the whole thing such an incredible experience.
I think it also will benefit from repeat listens like you mentioned, but like even myself, like I've repeatedly listened to this already and I've gained so much, extra understanding of what I am listening to just from like a couple of extra listens already.
It has so much within it though that every listen just feels like it's like this record just nourishes you with so many different aspects of what it does well and what it is that like we've come to love within like the alternative scene. It's like I can't really I have so much praise for this album because I think like as a whole it's just like such an incredible work of art.
Really recommend this one, and honestly, between this and Make Them Suffer, which I know doesn't technically release, it's not already released like this one is, at least as far as like getting reviewed simultaneously on this show, has to make this one of the strongest like release weeks for us, album discussion wise.
Yeah, agreed. I mean,
in a very long
and the next album we'll talk about sort of speaks to that a little bit, but I would be remiss to not touch on a little bit this getting two songs or getting the same song twice in this record that I haven't fully wrapped my mind around what the artistic decision is in there, but that's one thing that I'm curious to go try to read up on and understand. So you get Fade at track 5, and then the closer on the album is Fade, but in parentheses Into You, and for all intents and purposes they sound almost identical except that maybe the ending of Fade Into You is like slightly different. It's
slightly adjusted.
It's a very curious decision, and I want to know why artistically they chose to do it, but I don't know at the moment.
You could go a lot of different directions, right? Song's so good you have to put it on the album twice.
Certainly.
So and when Fade was originally released as a single, so was Fade Into You, and there was a lot of confusion there then as well, and people were just like, oh well, both won't be on the album, and here they are, and it's interesting. Like Fade starts again, and I don't know if it's like, is this some real artsy way of this band trying to see if people are paying attention?
It's one of those things where like I had to hit the Spotify and like, did this album end and it just kicked me to like the next single or something? Right. Like it was really perplexing.
It also fucked me up having another song in parentheses, Eye to Eye, Iris.
Well, almost like they're interconnected.
I had to go scan the first 7 tracks to make sure I was paying attention and didn't miss another Eye to Eye that I hadn't already heard that song.
Which would have been an interesting
because of that naming convention. So yeah, this one it's a bit of a head scratcher on an otherwise really satisfying album.
Marcus, and finally we checked out Lost in Heaven by Chase Atlantic.
Yo, we just touched down in Brazil. Yeah, we can fuck up the weather. Yeah. When it rains, it pours, so we all got Gucci umbrellas. Yeah, you know the vibes when we out of favela.
This is the Aussie Outfit's 4th studio album, released the 1st of November via Fearless Records. Lost in Heaven consists of 13 tracks and is the much-anticipated follow-up to 2021's Beauty and Death LP and its 2022 deluxe re-release. The road to Lost in Heaven wasn't easy. Writing trip turned into a survival mission during a massive blizzard, and later Mitchell, the vocalist of this band's laptop crashed, wiping out most of the album's instrumentals. We basically had to make a 5th album because we lost so much of what we were going to do. Mitchell recalls, I still don't keep any backups. I guess I like playing with fire, or maybe I like the challenges because none of our albums have been a piece of cake. End quote.
So this is crazy. And I didn't have any of that context prior to like an hour ago.
How do you want to keep that anxiety?
How do the other members of this band not like sit him down and beg him to just, here's a hard drive. It's 1 terabyte.
Right, or
let's just hang on to it.
Or the cloud. Or just literally back everything up on Apple.
Insanity.
But part of me feels like that is exactly who I want Chase Atlantic to be.
I kind of love it, right?
Right.
But it also does answer some questions.
Incredible.
I remember thinking to myself, like,
we should have gotten this album sooner.
Yeah, and I know Beauty and Deluxe came out Beauty and Death Deluxe came out in 2022, but like it has felt like 3 years since we got a record from this band.
Yeah.
And I have been waiting for a very long time because they've also consistently dropped like EPs in the past that really, held you over before the next album would come out. But anyway, here we are. And this one it kind of drives circles around Beauty and Death, I think.
Yeah, this leaves Beauty and Death in the dust. This is such a reminder of Chase Atlantic being absolutely that band. Even
I thought you were going to say that bitch, and I was going to fucking
or
nod until my head fucking flew off.
Or that. And while it certainly feels like this band exists on the outskirts of the scene, now more so than they did, 5 or 6 years ago when they were playing Warped Tour and they were touring with Sleeping with Sirens.
And they didn't have a couple of songs, shy of 1 billion listens on Spotify.
Right. They've become massively popular as well, but I still feel like this connection with this band. And it's like, I look at them and I still think they're one of the most incredible success stories to ever come out of the scene and one of the most talented group of artists by a mile. And I think all of that success they've earned is absolutely fucking deserved. And I know it the second I listen to an album like this, and it doesn't have a singular blemish on it. And it's so incredibly unique to them and their style. And the way that like they use all of these individual pieces within the band and their strong points so incredibly well. I walk away from this album and all I want to do is go back and listen to it. And Chase Atlantic have always been the band that can get me to do that. Right up there with like my true favorites within this scene. Like they are a Bring Me the Horizon or Bad Omens and I've said it in the past, My Chemical Romance level of talent for me personally, where their music just truly connects with me, even if lyrically it's all fantasy and I cannot personally extract any connection to it.
Well, I think that's always the coolest thing about Chase Atlantic is the way that they balance like real honest vulnerability with some of the most fucking ignorant and just outlandish lyrics imaginable at times. Talking about, when it rains, it pours, we've got fucking Gucci umbrellas versus, I think it was like Demon Time or Disconnected talking about like wanting to kill yourself in the shower one day. And then like one of the big standouts. I
believe that was Hours Lost, but yes.
Hours Lost. One of the big standouts on this record, Amy, which is very similar in its like storytelling to a track like help me out, the one where he says fucking aluminium.
Oh my god.
Off Phases.
That comes right back. It's not Heaven and Back, is it?
Heaven and Back. Yeah. The storytelling of like, that one is, about a girl who goes out and gets addicted to essentially like nightlife and then hard drugs. And this one's sort of that. It's talking about like a girl with a really rough upbringing. Father fucking kills herself when she's in like the 7th grade. And then 2 weeks later, her mom disappears and like, goes and does her own thing. And
there is a lot of whiplash.
Turns to a life of hard drugs and shit like that. And it's like, where like is this creativity even coming from between like talking about, you know, favela, I'm with the fellas at the favela,
I'm pulling out that Beretta, bro.
Yeah, I got an umbrella,
I got a bag of magazines. What's your issue?
It's Gucci.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. There is this almost like comical disconnect between songs at times where it's like you have the deepest, most emotional sort of like cut your heart wide open and let it pour out, and then you turn to the very next song and we're just talking about them cokein stains on our Nikes, bro.
Yeah. A ton of lyrical callbacks,
but it's crazy because it's like this band is able to hit like two completely different sides of the coin in terms of just like writing these like deeply, maybe I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase it. It's just like their writing style makes it so that no matter what they're singing about, it feels as interesting and intimate, but it's also like there's a level of, they're very clever in the way that they phrase things and the way that they present things, and it doesn't matter what the subject matter is, but there's also like a certain hype level where it's like even when we're just singing about being in love, like it's the same as when we're singing about doing drugs, and at times they're like ostensibly the same thing to Chase Atlantic in the way that they're presented, and it's just like it's really beautiful the way this band is able to like manage wordplay in particular, and then also like do it by bouncing off two different vocalists and like cutting to one depending on exactly how we want to frame the emotional presentation of what it is that we're saying.
One of the highlights on me for this record is getting an entire song just dedicated to our second vocalist.
Right.
Granted, it is a shorter track in Night Calls, and then having your one feature on the entire record, Xavier Maine, carry the bulk of one track on his own too.
Yeah, they're integrated really well.
I thought those were really cool decisions just in general. I think something like the Night Calls decision of just having Christian sing has probably been something fans have been clamoring for, joking about, you know, wanting to see happen for a very long time. And I think that's some cool fan service by this band to finally deliver on.
Mm-hmm. Clinton sax remains an incredible weapon.
I'm almost pissed it's until like track 4 that we finally get a solo with it.
Agreed. Though all that being said, I think that it's crazy to me that every song for me on here feels like a hit, and there are so few bands who can do that for me. And we were talking a little bit earlier about, you know, Make Them Suffer, where I feel like I come in and it's like, oh, the singles. I come into this and I'm like, damn, you know, Disconnected, Hours Lost, Favela, they're all right up there.
Demon Time, old non-singles.
Everything is fucking up there, which is just absolutely crazy, the consistency across the board.
The one thing with that I'll say is I do think that some of the single choices, you know, I woun't count Mamacita. Its song's been out for a while.
Mamacita feels like it just sort of got like grandfathered into this record.
Yeah, exactly. But like some of the single choices were head scratchers at the time and still continue to be. But I think the cool thing about Chase is that you really can just throw a dart at the board and whatever it lands on is your single. So it doesn't super matter in the end.
So it's like ultimately it's like you could have done Amy, but you did You, right?
Right. You
could have done fucking Demon Time, but you did Doubt It. Like it's like it truly does feel that way. Like there's just a wealth of like great material here to choose from. So it's almost irrelevant what you could have chose, right?
Favela to me seems like it should have been a single though.
But it also feels like an incredible hype track to enter the album on. And it's like what's great about this album is that, like, you know, I come into it and I have all those singles and I'm already thinking to myself, wow, can this band write a song as good as Ricochet? And they write 3 more on here. Like, it's just incredible to me. I'm absolutely at times baffled by how talented Chase Atlantic is, but it's good to know that in no capacity are they slept on. They have had massive success and they're truly one of the biggest stories to ever come out of the scene, even if people don't acknowledge them as a scene band at this point in time anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you say that though, and it still feels like this band is underrated to me.
Right, like there's still more like heights that they could reach. So that's been an episode, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week. Once again, 5 stars on Apple or Spotify. You enjoy the show. Thumbs up on YouTube. We love you. Bye.
Bye. Bleh.